What's up guys, Chris Schwartz-edmisten here from Schwartz-Edmisten Web Design. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and earlier this month we had May the 4th, the official Star Wars holiday, and then we also have the Obi-Wan show coming out later this month. So I want to take some time to build out this really cool Star Wars website design. This was for The Force Awakens, which is very old now, but that's alright. I want to show you some tips and tricks to tackle this design in Squarespace. We're not going to be able to replicate it perfectly, but I can show you some cool techniques that we can use to create a design that's very similar and definitely evokes kind of the feeling. And throughout this video, you'll learn some good tips and tricks for how to make designs that feel like really complex, how to create them in simple ways in Squarespace. So I'm here on the Squarespace templates page. I'm going to start this completely from scratch, and I'm going to start with the Nolan theme since the website design has a very dark aesthetic. Like, these are pretty dark backgrounds with white text. So I'm just going to pick a template. It doesn't matter which one you start with in 7.1, but in this case I want to start with Nolan because it has a dark background and it has white text. So I'll click Start with Nolan, and now I can create the site. Alright, so now that we have this created, I'm going to go ahead and create a new home page. So I'll create a blank page and I'll call this home, and then I'm going to set it as the home page, and I'll delete all the demo content because we don't need those pages anymore. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do on the home page is I don't necessarily have like a style guide to work off of. I don't exactly know how big the fonts should be or what fonts to use. So the best way to work in this case when starting a site is to just get the content in there, and then once everything is in there, you can see the relationship between like how big the text should actually be, how big the title should be in relation to the text, and how the fonts are looking. So that'll be my first course of action, is just to get everything in there, and then after that I can work on kind of refining the design and setting up my fonts and things like that. So I'm going to edit the page and I'll add a new section, and we'll just go ahead and add a blank section because I'm going to be adding all of my own content. I'm going to head to the background tab, and I'm going to add the hero banner background. And we definitely want the background to be full bleed, and I don't want any overlay opacity. You can see the overlay darkens it. We don't want that. I'm going to go to the format and I'm going to make it large for now. And I think that should be good for colors. By default, it should be white text. If I just put in some example text, cool. So we don't even need to pick a color theme here. Okay, so I'm going to drop in an image block here, and I'm going to upload that first graphic. It's the Star Wars logo here. So if we check out the design while that's uploading, so what I did is I separated this graphic here from the background, and then I separated out the background as its own plate. So you can see the first section kind of blends into the second section here, but it would be really difficult to build this out as one giant section here. So instead what I did is I just cut the banner image right here. So I'm picturing this as one section up here, and then this next video section as the next section on the page. And that makes more sense if these are anchor links too. If you click the video section, you would want it to take you right here on the page to this second section. So what I did is I just added an image block to this section, and I'm uploading this graphic as an image block. And then I'll be able to upload this text over here as text in a text block. So now that's uploaded, and now I can drag this text block over to the right of the image block, and then we'll drag that back over. And we need to center this logo, so I can just use a spacer block, which is just empty space on the page, to then recenter the logo. So you just have to make sure that the text block and the spacer block are the same size. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now over here in the menu, we need home, we need videos, we need cast, synopsis, and we need tickets. Okay, and I think we do need full paragraph breaks. Okay, so now I have that set up. I want these to be right aligned. And since these these headings here are different than the normal paragraph text. I'm going to make these paragraph size ones, and that way I can set up CSS to kind of space out the letters and make sure they're all uppercase and format them differently than if they were regular text. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then we can move on to the next section. Okay, so again, they're way too big, but I'm not even going to worry about that right now. So for the next section, I'm going to go ahead and add another blank section, and now we're tackling the video section. So actually, for my plan for this, for the videos, because it's in this carousel kind of format, actually I think it would be better to use an auto layout section rather than a regular section. So I'll remove that and click add section, and then we'll go to the list, and we can choose one that has a carousel on it already. So something like this, I think, actually something like this. Let's add that in there. Right off the bat, I'll just change the colors to something dark. Perfect. And then for the background, let's go ahead and upload that second background image. So again, I've just separated this background image from the content. And to create this kind of seamless transition between the first section and the second section, you might have noticed when I uploaded this first section and I went to the background, oh, well, actually I have to do it now. I'm going to drag the focal point down to the bottom, and that'll make sure that the bottom of the image is always in frame. And then on this image, I'm going to drag the focal point to the top, and that'll make sure that the top of this image is always in frame. So then we get a perfect seamless transition between the first section and the second section. So if I remove that background overlay, we'll start resizing the content, and it'll be much easier to see that background image in the background. So let's go ahead and edit the content. We want to show the image, but we don't have a title. And we also are going to want to show a button later on. I'm going to use CSS from my course to basically hide the button and make the image clickable. And my goal is to, in this section, because there's like this play button indicating that it can be clicked on, when someone clicks on one of these items in the carousel, I want the trailer to open in a lightbox. So you can imagine each image in the carousel could play a different video, and when each one is clicked on, then the video will open in a lightbox. So because I'm going to be setting up that later, I'm just going to go ahead and show the button now. If I go to the content tab, I'm only going to have one item for now because I only have one thumbnail to upload. So I'm going to go ahead and add an image, and we're going to use this video thumbnail. Okay, so the aspect ratio is completely wrong. So let's go to design. I think 3 is probably good. I like having it be an infinite scroll and showing the adjacent slides. I think that works for me. But we definitely need to change the aspect ratio, and I also don't want the card. Okay, so all of that looks good. Let's maybe go medium offset or large. Let's do large. I'm going to go to size and space. Okay, we want them to be inset. For the media width, let's keep it large. For the content width, there's no content. We want it to be centered. For the space between the elements, well, that doesn't really matter because we're only going to have the image. The button is going to be hidden with my CSS. And for the space between slides, let's just put that all the way down to 0. Right now, it still shows a gap, but I believe when we save it, it'll jump to 0. For vertical padding, let's go medium, and we can make all the cards the same size. It doesn't matter, but I'm just going to toggle on that setting. For the image crop, I'm going to go ahead and do 16:9, and already that starts to look much, much better. So I do need a title for this section as well, so I'm going to put in that title, and it's just going to be videos. Okay, all right, so I think for me, this section is looking good enough now. Let's just go ahead and move on to the next section. So I'm going to add a blank section. So this next section is this section here. And this is just kind of a simple setup. I'm going to have a text block for the title. I'm going to have an image block for this TIE fighter here, and I'm going to have 2 text blocks on either side, and I'm leaving this as part of the background image. It's easier than trying to position an image block in the section. So I will go ahead and edit the background, upload my background image, and it's the 3rd section here. And I'm going to remove the background overlay, and I definitely want to make sure that the Millennium Falcon is always in frame and also this number 2. So I never want those to be cropped. So again, I'm dragging the focal point to the top over here. And then next we can add in our content. So this is going to be synopsis, and I'll go ahead and center that. One thing to note is often Squarespace will add a space when you start typing in a block. So just something to be aware of. Okay, so I want all my headings to be heading 2s. And now I can add in my image block, and this will be the TIE fighter. Okay, perfect. So again, you can see I've saved all these sort of decorative elements as part of the images. It would be really difficult to try and do this with like CSS or something like that. So it's so much easier just to upload it as an image block. And you'll notice we're not getting all these fine details of the lines and things. We could do that with CSS, but it's just so problematic. And I think the design is going to look fine without them. So I'm not even going to worry about that stuff. From a design perspective, it's more difficult to create in Squarespace than I think it's worth in terms of the end result of the design. That's how I'll put that. Okay, so let's see. I have to make sure these spacer blocks are even on either side of the TIE fighter. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so let me start over here with this one. Okay, so we have that text block in place, and now over here, I'm going to do the release date. Okay, so we have that content in there. I feel like the title is a little bit close, and also like the Millennium Falcon is kind of encroaching on this content. So I'm going to go ahead and add a spacer block here just to space everything out a little bit. And then to center this text next to the image a little bit better, I'm going to go ahead and add spacer blocks above this content too. So it's not perfectly centered next to the content. Unfortunately, there's no way to do that in Squarespace. Hopefully that is changed in the future. But as of right now, just using spacer blocks to kind of scooch them down a little bit is the best that we can do. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next section, which is this cast section here. So again, I'm going to use a auto layout section, a list section set to carousel so that we can just toggle through each one of these actors. And that allows us to have a thumbnail, a title, and a description. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new section. And then this is going to be a list section. And again, I'm going to find that one that I used last time. So to edit this content, in this section, we do need a title. This is going to be cast. We need an image, we need a title, and we need a body. So that's perfect. We'll go to the content tab and we'll make this say cast. And we want that to be centered. For the color, I'm going to go ahead and change that right now. We want it to be dark. And then for the background image, I'm going to upload that one. Okay, so now we have the background image in. I'm going to go back and edit the content. So for the content tab, I'll delete everything. And we'll add in that image. We'll start with Harrison Ford over here. And if you hear any noise in the background, we're pet sitting a bulldog right now. He's very noisy. So apologize if you hear any grunts or slobbers. Okay, so we're going to start with Harrison Ford, and then it just says Han Solo underneath. So our title will be Harrison Ford, and then our title is going to be Han Solo. And I'm going to make these all caps. It's just easier to type them in that way. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and add another one. And this is going to be the Luke, Mark Hamill. So for the title, I'm going to do Mark Hamill. Make sure I spelled that right. And then this will be Luke Skywalker. And then finally, we have John Boyega as Finn. All right, so we have that in there. We can now head to the design tab and kind of change this up a little bit. So we do want 3 items, but we want everything to be centered. For the style, let's see. I think I want the offset to be large again. And we don't want the showing of adjacent slides. We want them to be cut off. If I go to size and space, let's set it to inset instead of full. For the media width, yeah, they feel a little bit big and I want to make them smaller. Unfortunately, I wish there was a way to like crop them more inward. So see how they're like very centered on the page and they're very small? There's no way to change that, unfortunately, within Squarespace. The only control we have over the content width is site-wide. So let me show you that change now. So I have a video on the site spacing panel and it goes over these controls in depth, but they're pretty simple. So definitely check out that video if you want to learn more. But right now the content is allowed to go up to a maximum width of 1900 pixels, which is really big. And the site margin is only 3 viewport width units, so 3% of the width of the viewport. So I'm going to increase this. I want a little bit more margin around the content, and that'll kind of like kick it inward a little bit. So I'm going to go with 6, and you can see already we have more gaps on the side. And then I want to limit the content at like 1600 pixels. I don't want it to be able to get quite so big. And actually, I'm going to go all the way down to like 1400 pixels. And you can see like that kind of keeps our content from getting too big. And actually, I'm going to go with more padding. Maybe let's do like 8 viewport width units. And this is a site-wide change, so this is affecting all the content on the site. But I think that's a good change to make. This bulldog is very gassy. I don't know if you guys are able to hear that. Okay, so getting back on track. So we have the cast here. I think this is good enough for my liking, and we can tweak some more of the settings, but I think that's good enough for the site styles. Okay, so let me save that change. Let me edit the content again. I'm going to go back to the sizing and spacing panel because there's a few other things that I want to do. Let's go ahead and move on to the last section in the design. So this is the ticket section. So for this section, I want to create a countdown timer for this section, but it's very simple. We'll have a text block, then we'll have a code block with the plugin, the countdown timer plugin code, and then we'll have a button block. So I'll add a blank section here, and we can add the background image. Last section, here we go. Again, I'm going to remove the overlay opacity. And for this one, again, I never want the number to get cropped, so I'm going to drag the focal point all the way up. Now we can add the last heading, which is just tickets. And I'm going to make that a heading 2 and delete the space at the beginning and center it. Now, I'll add in the code block when I add in the plugin and just kind of like my final sweep. But for now, I'll just add in this button block, and medium is fine. All right, so that was the last section. And then I guess we can just go ahead and edit the footer. The footer, I just want to be like really simple. I'll just do made with Squarespace. For the size, I'm going to click the 3 dots and make sure it's all the way down to nothing. And then for the alignment, I want to make sure that's center, and that'll make the footer really small. So now that I have kind of all the content done on the page, let's go ahead and set up the header. So I'm going to click on Edit Site Header. I'll go to Site Title and Logo, and we can add the logo image here. And for the logo height, so it's definitely like way too big. If I look at the reference again, you can see it's pretty small. Like if we look at it compared to the size of the logo, it's like half, I would say. So this is actually pretty good. I'll just leave it at like 30 pixels. I think that looks good. For elements, we want to enable the button, and this is going to say get tickets, and I'm going to make that all caps. And of course, if we had a get tickets page, that would link here. So I want to go to the header layout, and I want it to be centered, and we have the navigation on the left, the button on the right. That's perfect. For the header alignment, so you can see the button and the menu here, they actually stick out past the edge of the content. there's a setting for that in Squarespace. So you can either have the heading contents inset, meaning they line up with the rest of the content on the page, or you can set it to full and they'll be able to go past the content. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to full because that's how it was in the example. So next we'll go to style. I'm going to set it to theme first. So we have to pick a theme in order to change the button color. So I'm going to change it to the darkest one color theme here. And that way, when we set up the darkest one color theme to have a yellow button, that will update in the header. And now we can go to solid and we can change the background color to kind of like just a dark gray color, like in the example. Boom, good enough. And then for the navigation color, I want that to be white. Perfect. So again, there's no way to change the button color in the solid tab. That's why I had to go to the theme and choose a color theme and then come back to this tab. Kind of funky, kind of weird, but it is what it is. And then the next thing that I want to do is turn down the vertical padding. The header's just a little bit too big. I'll go with 1 viewport width. I like whole even numbers. And I think that's good for the header. So I'll go ahead and click save, and now we can start doing a little bit of the design setup. So definitely want to change the button color right now, and then change the typography as well. So let's go to site styles, we'll go to colors, and I'm going to go ahead and edit the darkest one color theme. And the only thing that we need to change, because all our text on the website is white, the only thing that we need to change is the button background color. So for the button background, I want to make sure I'm on the right color theme, darkest one. Button background, we're going to go to kind of like a gold color. I should have the hex code from the mockup, but I don't. So we're just going to go with that. It's close enough. Okay. All right. We're going to roll with that. And then for the text color, I want that to be black. So that's fine. So now our button color here is updating. These buttons don't matter because they're going to be hidden. And that was it. That was the extent of our changes to the color theme. And again, that's because I was strategic about the template that I started with. I knew I wanted a dark background with white text for all my sections. So it made my color setup very easy. So next I'll go to site styles and I'll go to fonts. And here for the headings, I actually am going to use pop-ins. So this template is kind of perfect for me because it already has pop-ins everywhere, which is exactly what I want. So I'll take it. For the headings, for the weight, right now it's set to 500, and these are like very thin headings. So I'm going to change that. For the heading weight, let's go all the way down to 300. And you can see here in the example, like the letter spacing is really big. So I'm going to go ahead and increase the letter spacing here. We want it pretty spread out. Maybe let's go 6.5. And if we scroll down, oh, okay. So increasing the letter spacing through the site styles has also increased the letter spacing of the headings in the list section. And we obviously don't want that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'll set up the letter spacing to look good like it does here for this title. And then I'll use CSS to target all my H2s and increase the letter spacing. So I'm just going to match it to that list title. So let me decrease the letter spacing here. So it looks like it was increased a little bit, maybe something like that. So we'll go 0.2. But now for my H2s, I can just use CSS to increase the letter spacing. And it was the same thing here. So the letter spacing for paragraph 1s is really big, but I can't change the letter spacing here because it'll change the letter spacing for all my text. So again, I'll use CSS right now to increase the letter spacing here. But one thing that I do want to change is my paragraph 1, I want it to be the same size as my regular text. So if you see like this text here, to me, it looks about to be the same size as this. It's just all caps. So I'm going to change this to 1 rem. Okay, so now it's smaller and we'll use CSS to increase the letter spacing. I'll just go ahead and hit save. And now I can go to the custom CSS window and I'll do the headings first. So we'll target all H2 headings on the site and we'll change the letter spacing to, I don't know, we'll just do 0.8 rem, and we'll keep going up, maybe 1.8 rem. Let's see, is this changing? Oh, okay. It wasn't changing this one. I'll have to see why that is, but here we can play with this a little bit. Maybe 3 rem. If we go, always, you know, keep an eye on the example. 3 rem might be a little bit big. Let's go 2.5. So rem units are based on the base font size. So it's basically 2.5 times the base font size. And if I go to my fonts panel, which I have to go back to anyway, if I go to fonts, you can see the base size is 16 pixels. So that rem unit is really 2.5 times 16 pixels. So if you want to convert rems to pixels, you just do the number of rems times the base size. So here, my H2 headings are much too big. I want to take those down a lot. So let's go down to 2. And then look at the example. And I think that's actually pretty good. I'm going to leave that at 2. Okay, I like that. So the next thing that we have to do is apply the letter spacing to the list titles as well. So we'll go back to our custom CSS to do that. So I'll hit save. Head back to the custom CSS window. And in addition to the H2s, I also want to target this element here. So I'll click inspect, and that'll bring up my Chrome inspect tools. Because I've clicked right on the element, it takes me right to it. And we can see the list section title. It's a paragraph element and not an H2. So that's why it wasn't applying. So I'm going to do list section title P, and that'll increase the letter spacing there. So we now have it matching the rest of our headings, which looks good. Oh, I have to do CSS for the menu over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to target the paragraph ones. So I'm going to go p.sqsrte large, open up some curly brackets. And for the letter spacing here, maybe we'll go like 1 rem. I think that's too big. If we go to the example, yeah, so maybe let's go like 0.5. And I think that looks a little more accurate. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. All right. So things are looking pretty good right now. I think now let's go ahead and jump into kind of like more of the functionality aspects of this site. Let's see. I'm not loving how the top isn't lined up, so I'm just going to crop this photo a little bit. These are just like little tweaks now that I'm going to go in and do just to kind of like get the site more looking how I want it to. So let me go ahead and click save. All right, so you can see what I mean about the seamless transition here. Because we've dragged this image's focal point to the bottom and this image's focal point to the top, and I've cropped them in Photoshop, saved them as individual files, but right up against each other, we now get that seamless transition where these are 2 different sections, but they just perfectly blend into a single section. So I'm really liking that. Here we have this cool functionality, but right now when you click on it, like nothing happens, obviously. So let's go ahead and set up the video Lightbox setup because I think that'll be really cool. So now we're going to jump into kind of the functionality portion. We have everything set up. Let's actually make this a good looking website, a good functioning website, I should say. So I have some plugins that I use all the time. The first one is the Video Lightbox plugin. I have a video on that, so you can check that out in the card that pops up if you want to. But that's what I'm going to be using for this build. So I'm going to go ahead and add those plugin files. And those just upload super quick. Boom. And now I can go to the code panel. And if you're wondering how I brought up that search window, if you click over here in the left-hand panel and then hit the / key, which is, you can see here, press / on a keyboard to search from anywhere. You can search for any window in Squarespace. And if you search something that doesn't work, then it's going to automatically do a Google search in Squarespace Help. But if you do type in the name of a panel, then you can go straight to that window. So a nice little shortcut there. But anyway, so I'm going to pull up the plugin instructions and we'll insert the plugin onto the page. And what this plugin does is anytime you link to a YouTube video, it automatically opens that video in a Lightbox on the site instead of like taking you to YouTube. So it's really, really clean functionality. So what I'm going to do is I'll pull up the new like Obi-Wan trailer, for example. And that'll just be the video that we link to. Just because I need something to link to. Okay, so now I'll go to edit and I'll edit my content. And of course, like we could do a bunch of different thumbnails here. This is the only one that I have saved, so I'm only using one. But obviously, each one of these would be their own thumbnails and they would link to their own videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in the YouTube video link as the YouTube video. And if I just go ahead and hit save, you can see the functionality. So if I click the button, it automatically opens the video in a Lightbox. So super sweet functionality. But we don't want a button here. We want just to be able to click on the play icon and then the video to appear. So for that, I have my own course. It's called Squarespace CSS Toolbox. It's a collection of CSS snippets for 7.1. And as Squarespace makes updates, I constantly update these snippets. So you know they're always up to date, which is great. And I have one for the auto layout sections to make carousel or list items clickable. So instead of having a button, it just makes you be able to click on the image. So what I'm going to do is copy that into the custom CSS window. And the only thing that I need to do to make this CSS function is I'll go to the content tab and I'll just remove the button text. So basically when you set up a button that doesn't have any button text, my CSS will automatically make the image clickable and it'll get rid of the button. So now there's no button, but you can see we can now click on these items. So if I click on the item, it'll automatically open the video in a Lightbox. So super sweet functionality there. Really love that. Okay, so let's make this website even more functional. Let's go down to the bottom, this ticket section here. It's squarespacethemes.com is the people that are making these plugins that I'm using. I bought their whole plugin pack. You can buy these plugins individually or you can buy the entire pack of plugins. And it's cheaper if you buy the whole pack. So that's what I did. So I just have access to a bunch of these different plugins that they created. So the video Lightbox plugin is by them. And also they have a countdown timer plugin as well. So I'm going to go ahead and upload the plugin files for the countdown timer. And I'll just go ahead and get that set up as well. It'll take a little bit of extra CSS to style the countdown timer how it is in the example with like the boxes around it and everything, but it's not going to take that much CSS at all. So I'm not even worried about it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the code injection and we'll install the code for the countdown timer as well. So I'll drop down below, paste in the plugin code, and now all I have to do is if I drag the instructions over here, so I just have to choose an end date. So we'll do May 25th and we'll do it at midnight. And you can have something happen after the countdown reaches 0, but I don't need anything to happen. So I'm going to copy that code and I'm going to add a code block to this section. And we'll paste that in. And when I hit save, it should appear. Boom, perfect. All right, so we have the countdown timer in here. It's not looking how we want it to, so I'm gonna have to use CSS to style it like the boxes in the example. But we have all of the functionality in here, which is, that's the hard part. So the plugin just automatically takes care of that, which is perfect. So we have these countdown timer dividers here, which we don't want. And then we have countdown timer items. And you can see it goes item, divider, item, divider, item. So what we're going to do is we're going to target the dividers first, and I'm just going to go ahead and hide them. So down here, I'll just add a comment. This will be countdown timer styling. Okay, so we'll target the divider, open up some curly brackets, and I'm going to give it a display of none because we want to hide them. Boom. So now all of our items just like shift together because there's no divider between them. So let's go ahead and target our items. So the first thing that we want to do, let's go ahead and add a border. And we'll do 1 pixel border, solid, and we'll make it white for now. And so now we have the border, but we definitely need some padding. So let's do padding of like 50 pixels. Now we get some space around them, and then we need some margin in between. So let's go ahead and add margin of like 10 pixels. But these first blocks are not, the margin is not applying correctly. If we go to this first item, you can see the margin is being hidden on the top because Squarespace automatically gives the first block a margin top of 0. But if we just override that with an important tag, then our styling will apply. So now we have them spaced out as well. If I go to the example, that actually looks like about the right amount of spacing. I might increase this to 15 though. Okay, sweet. All right, so that's looking good. And I also, let's go ahead and add a little box shadow. I'll go box shadow and we'll go 0 for the offset. And then let's do like 20 pixels of blur. And then for the color, I want it to be black. So I'm going to go 0, 0, 0. But now, because I'm using the RGBA, that stands for red, green, blue, and then alpha. So we can do transparency. So I'm going to do like 0.2 for the transparency. And so it gives it a black shadow, but it's a very subtle black shadow. And I just had an extra curly bracket there. So now you can see if I comment this out, it's very subtle. You might not be able to see it in the screen recording, but it really just helps them kind of stand out on the page, and it looks really good. So loving that. For the line, it's a little bit too sharp. It's too bright, so I want to use RGBA so I can set a level of transparency on it. But instead of black, I want to do white. So we'll do 255, 255, 255. And then for the level of transparency, maybe we'll do like 0.8, maybe 0.5. Let's do 0.5. Because in the example, you can see like it's, oh, I guess it's even more like a gray color. It's not even necessarily totally white. But doing white with the transparency kind of achieves that same look. Maybe we'll go 0.4. All right, so definitely liking that. Let's go ahead and check it out on mobile. Okay, so interestingly enough, our boxes on mobile, they're kind of like different sizes. So what I'm gonna do is I'll just add a media query. So we'll go at media screen and max width of 767 pixels because that's the start of the mobile view. Let's just make the width of these boxes like 80 pixels. So now like mandatorily the box's width has to be 80 pixels. And that'll make them all the same size on mobile. So another thing that I'm seeing is happening is the titles wrapping. Definitely not loving that. I think probably the way to deal with that is we'll go up, because this is targeting all of our titles. Let's go ahead and add a media query to those as well. So I'm going to copy this at media screen. So we're going to target these items on mobile. And for the letter spacing, let's turn it down. And I'll just copy this letter spacing here. But let's turn it down to like 0.5. And we'll see how that looks on mobile. And I can just kind of keep fudging this, just making sure that nothing is breaking. Maybe let's go 1.3. Okay, so I'll just do 1.3 on mobile. And what if I did 1.3 on desktop? How does that look? Not bad. Nah, I'll keep it how it was. So if I wanted to make it much simpler, I could just do 1.3 on desktop and then I don't have to worry about the mobile media query. But I do like how spread out they are on desktop. I think that looks good. Although I will turn it down a little bit. So now on mobile, our countdown timer is looking awesome. Our titles are looking good. We have nice functionality here on our carousels. Loving that. It still opens in a Lightbox, super sweet plugin. And then everything else is looking really good too. So I think the last thing that we have to do that I want to tackle, just to kind of like really make it look more like the design. Again, I could do these lines with CSS, but I don't really want to go to all that effort. And you can also see like the titles are offset here. That's something that we probably could do as well. But again, I don't think it's like super necessary for the design because we don't have those dividing lines. I don't know that it would necessarily translate so well to our example. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to focus on adding this one line here to the right that goes all the way down the page. So there's some things that we need to consider when creating this line. So I know I'm going to use an after pseudo element to place this line on the website, but things to keep in mind are it has to start where the content starts in this section, and it has to end where the content ends in the last section. So I can't just like add a line to the body and call it a day because it has to like perfectly line up to the bottom of the content. And it has to match that on all screen sizes. So instead of thinking of this as one big line that I somehow have to like perfectly align to the content, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to think about this line as individual lines in each section. So what I'll do is I'll find a container that houses the content, and I'm going to add an after pseudo element, and I'll add this little border to the right of that element, but I'll make the line super tall. So even if this content stacks and this section gets really tall, I'm just going to make sure that my line is like 300 times the size of the viewport. So it'll be really, really long. And then I'm going to add an overflow hidden to the section. So the line will only extend up until the next section and then get cut off. And then this section will also have a line on its content that's super tall that will extend the full height of the section and then get cut off. So then because the line is on each individual section's content, but it's really tall, but every section has it, it looks like it's a continuous line all the way up the page. But because, again, the line is aligned to the content in the section, we can then on the first section say the line should start at the top of the content. For every other section on the page, the line should be centered and extend the full height. And then on the last section, the line should start at the bottom of the content and extend upwards. So thinking about the line not as a one continuous line, but as lines on each section that then like look like they're one continuous line gives us that control to control when it starts and when it stops. Okay, so hopefully that made some amount of sense. So let's go ahead and tackle the line here. So this will be site line on the right. Okay. So if I inspect the page, that'll bring up my Chrome inspect tools. So this content wrapper here, so this looks like a good candidate, but unfortunately when you add a pseudo element to an element, it includes the padding. So if I were to add a border to the right of this element, the border would be off the page. So we can't use the content wrapper. We're going to have to use this content class. And you can see here the content houses all the content on the page. So if we were to add a border right to this element, it wouldn't be tall enough. But you can see it does start where we want it to start, and then it just doesn't extend all the way down. But if we add a pseudo element, we can make the height super, super tall, and then we'll add an overflow hidden to the section as a whole, and that'll cut off the line. So that's kind of the general game plan here. So what I'm going to do is I will target all page sections, and we're going to target the content class, and then I'm going to create an after pseudo element. Before and after pseudo elements require a content property, and we don't want to add any content here. You can see it adds the content to the page. We just want it to be blank, but we're going to use this to create a 1 pixel wide element. We want it to be positioned absolutely. And we want it to be positioned to the right of the element. And we want its background to be white. And this needs to be positioned relative to something. So if we go back to the content class, I'll show you that the content, it doesn't have a position of absolute. So the after pseudo element that we're adding, and let's make this a before pseudo element actually. It doesn't matter. The only thing that changes is the position of the pseudo element in the CSS. So now that I've changed it to a before pseudo element, it'll just be easier to see. So you can see here we have our content element, and now we have our before pseudo element. So right now, so here's the content, here's the before pseudo element. So it's getting positioned on the edge of the page because it's positioning relative to the nearest parent that has a position defined. So here the content, so we have this element, this is the nearest parent, but it doesn't have a position defined. This is the nearest parent with a position defined. So all we have to do is give the content class a position of relative, and then our after pseudo element or our before pseudo element will be positioned appropriately. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the page section content targeting, and we'll give it a position of relative. Okay, so I thought that would do it, and it did not. So let's go ahead and see what might be happening. Okay. We forgot to put, I forgot to put a height. So we can see our before pseudo element, it is positioned right next to our content, but it doesn't have a height. So let's go ahead and give it a height of 300 viewport height. And now you can see it goes all the way to the bottom of the section. And if we go to the section, let's see, does it have an overflow of hidden? Oh, of course. Okay, it's a z-index issue. So if we were to give this page section a higher z-index, we would see the line going all the way down. Oh, here we go. So we can see it extending all the way down here. So this is a super long line. This section just has a higher z-index, so it's covering up the line, but we can see the line goes like super far down the page. 300 viewport height means 300 times the height of the screen. So that's why this line is so long down the page. But if we go ahead and just target the page section and give it an overflow of hidden, so we'll go page section and we'll give it an overflow of hidden, that will now hide the line. So it won't extend. Oh my gosh, of course, I'm an idiot. Okay. So I forgot, we're adding the line to all the sections on the page. So, so this line is not extending all the way down. It is simply, okay. All right. Okay. I had to think about how to explain it. Okay. So let me get rid of this overflow hidden. So this line is super tall, but it's actually just overlapping. So we've added this line to every single section. So like this line is extending all the way down. If we go ahead and inspect, we can see how tall the line is. But the reason that I thought it was extending down to these sections is because I'm also adding the line to this section. So if I go to the content and we go to the before, so we can see how far down the before element extends. So it keeps going and it's just overlapping. So this is where the line ends from the first section. So you can see how far down it goes. And the reason that I've made it so tall is because we don't necessarily know how tall these sections are going to be on different screen sizes. As content stacks and wraps, the sections get taller. So I just want to make it super tall so that I'm never worried about it being too short. And again, because we're adding this overflow of hidden here to every section, that'll just cut off the line as soon as it gets to the bottom of the section. So if we make it super, super tall and then cut it off, we never have to worry about it not being tall enough on a certain device. So that works for these regular sections, but the structure of the list sections is different than a regular section. And one other thing to note is we also don't want it to apply to the footer. So luckily, an easy way to exclude the footer is to just target the main page content. So obviously, page sections that are added to the footer are also being targeted here, but the main page content is wrapped in this main wrapper, and you can see the footer content is in a separate element. So if we just add main before this, so we'll go main, main, and main. And now this is, I don't like it when it drops down. Now this is just targeting the regular page content. You can see the footer doesn't have a line added. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. So the next thing that we want to do is you can see the line is starting at the top, which works for the top section, but in the bottom section, we want it to start at the bottom. And on these in-between sections, we want the line to be centered so that it extends up and it also extends down. So what I'm going to do first is for most sections here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a transform. Well, first, okay, so from the top, so I'll do top of 50%. And so that's going to bump down the line. It's going to start 50% from the top, and then we're going to move the line up 50% of its own height. So that's how you can center something. So we'll do transform, translate, and we're going to translate it on the y-axis, and we're going to do negative 50% of that element's own height. So now you can see the line is centered in the section, and it extends up and down. So if I right-click, we'll get to the content and the before pseudo element. And so now you can see the pseudo element is extending really far up, and it's also extending really far down. So now it's perfectly centered in this section. So that's great. But now if we go up to the top, it's also centered in the top and in the bottom, which is not what we want. But what we can do is we can target the first section on the page. So here, all these page sections have their page section class, but we can target the first page section. And the way we can do that is we can do main.page section, and then we'll target this before pseudo element. Except we only want to target the first child. So this is now only targeting the first section on the page, and we don't want any transform, so I'm going to set that to none. And we want the top to be 0. Boom. So now in the first section on the page, it starts at the top, but on all the other sections, it's centered. And on the last section, so we don't need to repeat any properties that we already have up here. So these are already applying to all of them. So I'm going to delete these properties that I don't need to repeat. So you can see it's still working. And then in this last section, I'm going to copy this and we'll go to the last child and we'll change this to bottom. And we'll give it a top of auto. There we go. Okay, so now you can see it extends down to the bottom of the content and then shoots upward. Now, I got distracted real quick because I'm noticing this section just is not tall enough. Our Star Destroyer is getting cut off, so I'm going to make this large. And that should look a lot better. Now we can appreciate the art in the background. And now you can really see how the line only goes to the bottom of the content and then goes upward. So one thing that I don't like is it's so crammed next to this content. So I'm just going to move it to the right. We'll pull it to the right minus 17 pixels. And that'll just kind of shift it over to the right even farther. And that just gives it a little bit of breathing room, which I think is definitely much needed. Okay, so let's full screen that and kind of just see where we're at. I'm definitely liking it. I think it looks good. We just have to kind of shore up the line in these sections here. So the list sections get different formatting. So they also have a content class, but you can see the content class in these list sections is full width. And since we're adding it to the right of the content, our border is off the page. So we have to find an element that also like has this same width. So if I keep just toggling open these elements, we should eventually come to something that maintains that width. So I'll scroll down. Okay, I think this is our winner here. So this user items list carousel slideshow holder, it looks like it has the same exact width as the rest of the sections. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this class. So now we want to add an after pseudo element to this element as well. So I'm going to add a comma and we'll go main and then paste in that class. And then we'll do before. Okay. So now we can see the line gets added and it is in line with the other lines. So we have the right container. The problem is it looks like that container has an overflow of hidden on it. And so it's cutting off that line before we want it to get cut off. So if we go to the slideshow holder, one of these elements has an overflow of hidden. Here we go, overflow hidden. So if I turn off this overflow hidden, we're then able to see that line. So I'm just going to target this item in the custom CSS. And again, I only want this to apply to list sections on the main page because these list sections are the only ones that are going to have the line. So I'm going to do overflow of visible. And there we go. Boom, we get the line going all the way down the page. So if I full screen that, you can see it goes all the way down and then stops at the end of the content. So that's perfect. I'm going to move it over more. I feel like it's just kind of like encroaching on the content too much. So let's go minus 34 pixels. And then it's too bright for me. So I'm going to give it an opacity of like 0.4. And that should match the opacity over here too. So it's a little bit more subtle. And I think that's looking pretty dang good. I don't mind that it's getting cut off over here. I think that's preferable to being over the content. So I think that's fine that it gets cut off there. One thing I want to do is bring my arrows way in. I feel like they're too far away. So again, these are just kind of little tweaks that you'll notice as you're going throughout the design. So that's in the spacing, the style panel, navigation offset. You can increase this way up. So I'm going to bring those way in. Okay, so 20 viewport widths. And I'm going to do the same thing over here too. I want to bring those way in. 15 looks good. Okay, and that way it's just not like competing with the line over here. And then looking at these thumbnails, I want them to be a little bit bigger too. So if we edit the content, one thing that I can maybe do is, one way to make them bigger is to do less. So there's only 2 items that take up the width of the page, and that'll make them bigger. But then you have to, like, one is not more important than the other. So from a design perspective, like having one centered makes that one seem more important. So I'm hesitant to change the max columns. Let me go to size and space. Let's see, media width. If I do full, that makes them a little bit bigger too, but okay, I'll just do full. Well, no, because then our line shifts. So I can't do full because the line shifts over. So I'm going to leave it at inset. I guess I could choose a different thumbnail aspect ratio actually. So if we do like 4:3, 3:2. 3:2 looks pretty good. All right, I'm just going to leave it like that. And actually, I'm not a huge fan of where those arrows are landing. So I'm going to go back to the design tab and decrease the offset a little bit. I'll do 15 on this one too. So it'll be 15 on both. Okay, so I'm done making little tweaks. You know, you can tweak a website to death just by doing these little changes. I don't think the design is getting, you know, better as we make these little tweaks. Just such little things. So I think I will call it right there. You can see we've created a really nice functional website. Really cool that you can play the trailer on a Lightbox, and then that we also get this countdown until the tickets are released or the movie is released. I think that's really cool. We managed to get this line to the right, which is pretty cool in design as well. And then love this kind of full screen carousel thing here with the cast and the videos. So the last thing that I could do is I could make these anchor links here. I have a whole video on creating anchor links. I'm not going to do that. These were a little bit more spaced out in the example. But again, these are little changes. I keep getting sucked into making little changes. I could make these anchor links. So when you click on something, it goes to a section. The video section would go to the videos section, for example. I have a video on that, so check that out if you're wondering how to do that to make it just a little bit more functional. Other further things that I could do on the design. So we see we have a hamburger menu over here. I have a plugin on my site that creates a hamburger menu on 7.1. So that's pretty much the only way to do that is to use CSS. So my plugin is a really good option for that. So you can check that out. If you go to my website and you go to the shop, it's this hamburger menu. Let's see, hamburger menu on desktop in 7.1. So I have a video walking through this plugin as well. Check out that card up here. So many resources for you guys. And then I also have a fun video on my YouTube channel on how to make like a little lightsaber animation for the menu. So that might be cool to add too. So a bunch of other little things that you can do to make the site pop that much further. But for now, I'm going to call it. We created a very cool site in Squarespace, and it didn't take too much time at all. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know in the comments below. Consider subscribing. if you enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.